Grapes are a popular fruit that holds great potential for us in North Dakota. Here to teach us the basics of growing grapes in our state is Dr. Harlene Hatterman-Valenti. Harlene was born in Nebraska and raised on a crop and animal farm, and then she came to North Dakota in 2000 as an assistant professor in the High-Value Crops project. Harlene has conducted research on over 20 crops, but grapes have been one of the most predominant crops throughout her 25 years at North Dakota State University. Harlene, welcome to the forums.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Welcome.
Okay, so we're going to get started here. So the goal in this next 15 minutes is that you're going to see handouts or slides where suggest grapes that'll overwinter in North Dakota, very important. Determine some of those cultural practices that'll help you grow those grapes, also very important. Um, if they don't ripen, I suppose in jelly and juice, you could still add more sugar and make that work. But to have the best quality, you want to go and have ripe grapes. Thus, going to those first two is very important. And if you get all three of those, you'll probably get this fourth one. So, site selection, a lot of us don't have a choice. I just bringing this up so that if you did have a choice, there's some things you want to avoid. So if you are able to have that 1.5 to 3% slope, that's going to help move that cold air down to the bottom. You don't want to be down in that bottom. You can see on that picture on the left-hand side, your vineyard, if it's not in the bottom, you could be at 35 to 40 degrees there, while someone who had something lower is going to go and get froze out. And I've seen this happen more in Montana, where they actually have some big differences in terrain, and in which they actually did put grapes into a low area. It was a nice flat level low area, but they had this huge mountain that that cold air would just come down. You can go and avoid those kind of frosts about 3 weeks if you're on those hillsides instead of those valleys. So big important thing. If you can get it on a south slope, you're going to be able to control more of your bud break. Now, it might be earlier, so sometimes the south slope can be bad, but you're going to get your maximum daily temperature. You're going to get a lot more foliage drying, which will avoid a lot of your diseases. You're going to get radiant heating, which is going to be very beneficial. And your winter temperatures are going to be minimal. And your season length is going to be as long as possible by having that south slope. But sometimes that south-facing slope, because of our location, we actually, I'd say maybe about a month ago, we're getting a lot of, that sun has a lot of warming capabilities. So what we see a lot of times is on that south-facing part of a trunk, it warms up, but then when the sun goes away, it really drops down. That trunk has that darker color, so it warms up, but then we get back into the real cold temperatures, and we cause some splitting of the trunks. So in those cases, if we can do something to minimize that warming, I think the long practice with apple trees and some other trees they'd go and paint white on the south facing part of those trunks to avoid that heating up and then cooling down. Wind. Now, we all know that North Dakota is windy, maybe not this windy, but wind really can influence temperature. A calm condition, as you can see there, 18 degrees higher temperature on those leaves than if they're open to the wind blowing. And that also is really important for the fruit because heat, it controls the ripening. And thus we try to get as much light, thus heat, onto those grape clusters to go and hasten ripening, which is very important in North Dakota because of our short season and the fact that we want those um, vines to start to acclimate for dormancy as quickly as possible. So you can use shelter belts, you can use south sides of buildings, fences, and like that to help go and reduce that real strong wind. You want a light breeze. A light breeze isn't bad, but really strong winds aren't good. Um, as far as soil, really the only time you have to be concerned is if you have a, a hybrid grape that has a lot of labrusca in it. So Concord, something that says it was, I know there's seedless Concords that when that soil gets above 7, they tend to show iron chlorosis. An example that we've seen is Bluebell, which you might have heard. That's a Elmer Swenson one. Here's ES5471, another Elmer Swenson one. Well, all three of them are, but this one never got released, but could be available. And then Louise Swenson. All of them have quite a bit of Vitis labrusca in them. Thus, they have larger berries, kind of like Concord grapes. And we have seen where you'll have problems with some iron chlorosis. So because we do tend to have soils that are above a soil pH of 7. So in those cases, you need to add some sulfur if you're trying to grow those crops and you start to see those iron chlorosis symptoms. Fertility, too much fertility is a problem because instead of going and those vines putting that into the fruit and into the production, it usually puts it into canes that go to I was going to say Carrington, probably not that far, but Castleton. Just you got end up with 20-foot long canes, which isn't needed, and then starts to cause all kinds of problems. What I generally tell people about 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre on a yearly basis. Now, in the Fargo area, we have clay and higher organic matter, so you need to count that in. So 1% organic matter releases about 20 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. So if you don't go in those soils that have higher organic matter, if you don't go and utilize that, you're going to be putting way too much on, and thus have that excess growth. I've also seen the opposite where, after 10 years, they haven't put on any nitrogen and they have a lot of grass growing right up next to the vines, competing for any kind of nutrients and out competing. And thus they don't have enough growth. They got canes that are only about a foot and a half, 2 foot long. And that definitely isn't a hybrid grape. So it's important to know what type of grape, what you want to do with these grapes. If you're trying to make, like I said earlier, juice, jam, or jelly, if they don't ripen completely, you can go and easily add some sugar and still be able to go and make your juice, jam, and jelly. Table grapes, the problem with table grapes is we don't have a lot of cold hardy table grapes, which are seedless. Now, if you consider something like these three that have seeds in them as table grapes, well, then, um, but nobody wants uh, grapes to eat that have seeds and that you have to spit seeds all the time. Uh, University of Minnesota is working on this. So are we on trying to find and develop some really cold hardy seedless table grapes. Wine, wine's a little bit more difficult because there's all kinds of characteristics that you need those grapes to be at when you harvest them so that you can make a proper wine. pH is important, titratable acidity is important, as well as the Brix or the sugar. Okay. Grapes for North Dakota. Well, of course, we know that we need to have low temperature tolerance. We're in a 4A, as you can see here in the Fargo area. If we went out west to the Williston area, they're closer to a 3B. Um, and I think there's still that. There's been some redoing of actually the cold hardiness zones. But for the most part, most of North Dakota is a 4A. There could be some parts that are more 3B. Um, you need to also consider your growing degree days. You can see here now, it's supposed to get colder in Williston than it does in Fargo, but they have more heat during the summer or during that growing season than we do, just a little bit. And but the Fargo area has a few more days that are frost free. So we're talking from the last spring frost to the first spring freeze. And once that happens, those grapes don't ripen anymore. So um, you might have a cultivar that is marginally adapted to this area. So you see it dies back. And that's the worst part about it. It dies back or you lose it breaks bud really, really early and you lose all of those on a consistent basis. And then you don't get any fruit because the fruit comes on the previous year's buds. So if you don't have those buds survive, you won't get any fruit that year. And thus you'll have 1 year without as you're starting all over. Okay, cultivars. And you can see here, there's, like I said, there's a lot more wine grapes available than there are those strictly for juice and 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 or table, and that's because really for our season and for what's available so far, it just that's a market that works for us. Two white grapes that we recently introduced and released by NDSU are Dakota Primus, uh, which you're looking at that and you're like, well, that isn't white at all. And it's more of a gris as far as the color, but that skin color, even if you were to ferment on the skins, which you usually don't do with whites, you'll maybe get a little bit of more of a pinkish and actually the darkness that you'll get with this cultivar has a lot to do with how hot the summer is. If we don't have a really great warm summer, it might be a little bit more kind of closer to the prairie star. And then you'll see and maybe just a little bit of light reddening in those berries. The other one is radiant, and you can see it looks green and um, but still is a white wine, and it may turn a little bit more yellow, similar to Prairie Star as it ripens, but it's more of a green type grape for that is used for white wine. You can see there's a whole list of things here. Um, and the only one for table is what we call well, it is called Somerset Seedless. It's a release by Elmer Swenson. We call it somewhat seedless because there are seed remnants in there. However, they're really no problem whatsoever. Gives a little bit of that you can notice it. You never would notice it in a raisin if you dried these for raisins. Um, and so, and oh, if you were to dry those for raisins, you would never buy a store-bought raisin again because these have so much more flavor than anything you could ever get in the store. Raisins from the store are just like little chewy sugar drops, versus you really get some good grape flavor. This year, we're going to start evaluating some of the seedless, um, I'd say, advanced selections from the University of Minnesota. Uh, and, they can't they can't put down what the numbers are for purposes of patenting and like that. So they called it Grape R, which was the red one, and you can see um, how that shape is. And they feel like this is an improvement over Somerset Seedless. Cluster looks a lot similar to Somerset Seedless. Grape B for blue. Again, it has this unique blueberry taste to it, and they've been looking at it in processing for frozen as well as baked. And um, because it isn't real large, maybe some mechanical harvesting because it is rather tough, though. Unlike most of your other table grapes, you would never consider um, a red globe to go and try to do any kind of mechanical harvesting with that. And then the last one is this G or green um, grape, and you can see it almost, to me, it looks more like a lucrescent cluster. And it talks about having those aromatic and tropical flavors, which is a lot like lucrescent. But this is a seedless. So the only thing I do know about these is they feel like they're good in zone 5, well, which is down by the cities. We aren't zone 5. I'm going to try these on campus where we have a little bit more protected um, microclimate, but it'll be a wait and see, and maybe there's something that we can do to try to hasten because they all um, the harvest time is well, you can see for the grape G, it's over 3 to 4 weeks, but they're all towards the later part of the season, not real early. So it will be interesting to see what happens with these three, and hopefully we can keep everyone abreast of what's going on. Let alone we're planting our first ones in the field this year for seedless evaluation. Okay, so let's go and start talking about some production. Ooh boy. Um, you, Most of the time, you're going to go and get dormant rootstock. They're not going to ship that until towards the end of May to be planted. Maybe they'll ship it sooner, and then you have to keep it in a cooler or do something to keep that cool, unless you go and get those at a nursery that has potted up plants. Um, because you only wanted one or two. Nice thing about grapes is almost everything that's going to be available to you are complete flowers, so you don't have to go and have something go and pollinate it. So they're not like apples. You don't need cross-pollination. So if you just wanted one, you could actually just get one. If you got green material, you want to probably wait until the end of or until June after that May 31st, which is usually the time for the latest risk of frost in North Dakota. Dimensions for planting, I think that all depends on the space that you have. Um, and again, if you're only having a couple of plants, then a lot of this isn't important for you. Whoops, got ahead of myself. Weed control is kind of important because anytime you have a lot of weeds growing around that base and competing with that root system, um, that's not good. Likewise, if you're going to put a mulch down right away, don't use something like straw. We've done a study where we've gotten 1-year-old dormant cuttings. We put them in the ground and we use straw as a mulch, and the microbes are going to go and be using all the nitrogen that's in that soil to go and break down that straw because it has a very high carbon to nitro or high carbon amount in comparison to nitrogen. So those microbes are going to need nitrogen, and the only place they're going to find it is in the soil. So those vines will really struggle if you use something like straw that first year. Now, later on, when you got nice established vines, I suppose straw would be just fine because um, uh, they just have a good root system and you're going to be applying some of that nitrogen on an annual basis anyway. You want to start then your trellis construction afterwards, and but really that first year, all you're trying to do is get those vines established. A lot of people will say, "Oh, do I go and put?" Well, let me go and do I go and put grow tubes around them? Yes, if you have problems with anything like rabbits, deer, then this is going to be helpful. What we found is that a grow tube isn't necessarily needed um, as long as you're acclimating. If you're using plants, they're acclimated before you put them out there, and thus aren't going to go and be thrown into a different kind of environment, or as long as you don't have a lot of those little critters that want to go and destroy everything for you. So the first year we're really working on the root growth. I wouldn't do any pruning. I just try to keep them growing as much as possible because that they're whatever you get for the root starting there, it's going to be the basis. That's going to be like your foundation for your house. You have a poor foundation, the rest of the house isn't going to stand up very well. Second years, you're going to start working on your vine architecture, doing some pruning, and you might leave a few clusters to taste, but really most of those clusters you should remove because you're still working on that foundation. Finally, your third year, you can go and keep your fruit. I'm going to go over that because I can see how much lack of time I have. And again, those kind of trellis materials all depend on how many vines you're going to get and your location. But you're going to need something. Even though I say they have a trunk, they don't have a really good. They need support. So you need to find some way of supporting these so that they're upright. And stuff to consider are, you know, your physical limitations on how you're going to grow them. Can you go and put them on a high wire that generally is 6 foot tall? Well, do you want to always have your hands up in the air when you're working on those? Do you want to maybe a little bit lower? Do you want to maybe go with a mid wire and train everything to grow upwards and thus have that fruit at that mid-wire, which is about 3 foot. All of those things are important. Okay, pruning. It's important that you go and have balanced pruning because you need to control your crop. Um, Most of the time, you'll remove 80%. You can see it almost looks like maybe 90% of what was there. Um, because if you don't, you're going to overcrop it. And especially in North Dakota, that's really important that you don't overcrop. Um, yeah. Bud fruitfulness, also another thing on um, so having all that growth and like that, if you didn't go and take any of these canes off from the previous year, that means you're going to have lots and lots of layers of leaves. And the more shading onto those clusters, the less fruitful those buds will be at on those clusters, the slower they'll ripen, but also those nodes and buds for next year, they'll get less light too. So they're going to be less fruitful. So sunlight exposure is really, really important. Here shows differences for different locations. Generally, we use this 30 plus 10 for any kind of grapes we grow, especially the wine grapes in North Dakota. And that plus 10 means if you get more than 2 pounds of pruning from that wood. Oh, 1 pound pruning. What am I getting off? So, no. So if you're pruning and from a vine you get more than 2 pounds of pruning, you can add 10 more buds and have a total of 40 for this. But we're using this lowest one right here for almost all of ours. Now, if you've got more than 2 pounds and you're way up here at 4 pounds, and you can see where we have, the um, number of fruit like that, this means you're undercropping and you're not leaving enough fruit. But if you're way up here, um, then you're overcropping. I always try if I have 2 pounds per vine, and we take out just a little fish scale. After a little bit, you don't even need that scale. You kind of know what's what. But 30 plus 10 is a lot what we use. And I'm not going to go over all this because I can see I'm already at that time. Um, some characteristics, shoot density. So per foot of shoot or canopy, um, you want 3 to 5 shoots to be coming out. So that means 3 to 5 nodes per foot, more on that, hopefully on that. Usually in a foot, you can get 3 nodes. If you get more than that, um, it means that that vine might be under stress, that it has shorter nodes. Well, I'm going to go over that. Shoot thinning. Okay, so this is done to open the canopy, but it all depends on what kind of trellis. If you have your trunk going up and then you put out cordons or arms and thus have just removing most of that cane wood, leaving 2 shoots at each of these, what is called spurs. What happens on that is then as those vines grow, they get longer, you comb them down, and then when they're about to touch the ground, you want to go and prune that off. Um, they talk about a lot of times shoot thinning before those canes get 18 inches long. That's because you don't need that much. You need 15 to 20 leaves to go and ripen those 2 to 3 clusters that's on a shoot. All that extra is just extra stuff that might go and actually go and cover up and shade a lot of that. The problem is, the minute you start doing some pruning, you get what is called lateral shoots. These have no kind of fruit on them and they start to shade things out. So, shoot thinning a lot of times is very helpful on going and keeping enough light onto these and removing those lateral shoots. It becomes a lot of work. Some people will even actually remove leaves that are around the clusters to help expose those grapes to that the sunlight to those clusters. Crop thinning, well, um, oh, but if you're going to go and remove those leaves, you don't wait until, the clusters are really huge. You need to start before you get to veraison because otherwise, um, and maybe you only do it on the west side or on the east side. The west side is going to be warmer than the east side. So you remove them on the east side to help get those leaves or the clusters a little bit warmer, and you don't have to worry as much about sun scalding or sun burning those clusters. Crop thinning, if you're going to do something like that, you would do that. You would wait until about 4 weeks after fruit set. Fruit set occurs in early June, so so by early July, you would know whether or not you have way too many clusters to go and get them ripen in time. And then you can start to go and oh, I got 3 clusters on this cane. I don't need all 3. I'm going to just remove 1 and keep 2. A lot of times 1 to 2 clusters per cane is good. So, and of course, you always want to, if sometimes there's a stress, they might throw out some more late clusters or do some flowering, and then you have some late clusters. Always remove those because they're just going to go and cause problems. Okay, last little bit. Fred. Okay, herbicide injury like 2,4-D is going to can be really common. Grapes are really susceptible to 2,4-D, even more so than dicamba. So you see this fanning. And if they're in your backyard, there's a lot of people using 2,4-D on their lawns. Thus, you might see something like this happening. Birds, especially for homeowners, you might need to do some netting because birds really like grapes. They like a lot of fruit. So, and when you only have 1 to 2, that really puts a target on those. So, deer, raccoon, rabbits, I'm going to questions. I did poor, Tom. Sorry.
I warned you. You're just too knowledgeable. You got
Ah,
too much information to share.
well, I got too many stories, I think.
I know it's because of all your years of working with this crop. Now listen, so we got rapid fire questions, really quick answers. We're going to be done in 5 minutes. Okay, Harlene, first of all, would any grape varieties work well in a high tunnel?
The problem with that, all of these, if they're hardy enough for outside, they're good for a high tunnel. The thing that you can't do is you can't think because I have a high tunnel, which is going to give you more heat, that you're going to go and be able to have something less hardy, cold hardy. Because in the winter, especially at night, you don't have that, the plastic doesn't retain that heat. So your outside temperature is going to be the same as what's going to be in that high tunnel. Thus,
Okay, that's good. Pick a hardy variety. They'll all work. They
yep,
have to be hardy. This person is a grape seedless due to genetics, or is it seed, or can I make a grape variety seedless by eliminating manganese away from the plant?
no,
Yep,
genetics.
it's genetics. Now, what was that variety you liked for raisins?
Oh, Somerset seedless.
Yeah, you want a seedless variety, and that's really the only hardy, reliably
Yeah,
hardy variety we got. Now, this person lived in Dickinson and they grew Frontenac Brie,
Hmm.
Prairie Star, and La Crescent. But now they moved to West Fargo. Which one of those would you recommend?
Oh, actually, all three of them would be even better. We get more rainfall, and so depends if they want. The crescent is more fruity, but if we ever get a really bad winter, then La Crescent has it really likes to throw out volcanes, and it can be difficult. But all three of them, Frontenac Gris will make more of a straw colored wine, but they can do all three of them would be fine. West
Okay.
Fargo.
This person has an old, neglected grapevine. Should they cut it to the ground or just dig it out?
You can rejuvenate old grapevines,
Okay.
um, but you're going to again. What happens with old vines is that if you haven't done anything, it's only that 1 year old wood that's going to have fruit. So you're going to have to do some major cutting back, um, and then keep pruning. So I would cut it back to generally we like to have 2 arms and do cordons. You might have to do a little bit more cutting back. Also, you could also work at a lot of times they'll set up a sucker will come up from the base, make that your new trunk, and then you can go and lop off everything else or two trunks
How about when's the best time to prune a grapevine?
before it starts to open the buds. Those buds become really easy just to knock off. So now we just had a pruning clinic by Air yesterday, and they were still dormant. And so this is a good time. Other people go out when it's colder and they have their gloves on, but boy, this kind of weather is just perfect. If you can go and get it done quickly, do it now.
Are all grape leaves edible for Greek recipes?
Yeah, but I would probably avoid the ones that have all the white tomatos on the backside. I don't think those would be as tasty as something that isn't as pubescent on the underside.
Okay. How about what variety is best for up north in the Turtle Mountains?
Oh, well, what are they trying to do with it?
Well, juice, I would guess.
Juice. Okay. Um,
Their only
well,
choice.
our overall our hardiest grapes that we've ever tested are Valiant and King of the North.
Okay.
Um,
It's good.
yeah,
Is spotted wing Drosophila a concern with grapes?
not unless you have problems where with rainfall in the fall that you start to get little fissures or little openings by where they attach to the stem. That then um, Valiant has been the only grape that we've seen anyone report spotted wing Drosophila. And again, we feel like it was because of some rainfall, which then put a crack, and then the spotted wing Drosophila said, "Hey, thank you," and
Okay.
laid some eggs.
I'd start my own grapevine from a wild grape and just take a cutting and stick it in a pot and get started.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, that's good. What's the best mulch you would use in an established vine? Shredded bark?
Shredded bark would be good. Yep. Because the larger the chunks, the slower the degradation would occur.
How about Mareschal Foch? Are
Yeah,
those
Marcel Foch.
are those seedless?
No, that
Okay,
is a
that's
French
good.
American wine grape.
Um, that's not hardy here, is it? Or it's marginal.
Kind of iffy.
Yeah.
Not looking the best out in our variety trial.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this presentation. Thank you. It was loaded with information. I couldn't get to all the questions, but you can contact Harlene and
Yes,
or you can contact your local county agent. They can help you, and also myself. We'll be happy to help you. Okay. Thank you, Harlene, so
awesome.
much.